Hello and welcome everyone to our Sutra Studies class. Let's take a moment to appreciate our community gathered here today by reciting our community affirmation. Today I feel fortunate to sit as a member of this kind community in the safety and security of like-minded friends, sharing this present moment with others dedicated to the cultivation of goodness. Today I'm grateful for the direction and support that this community provides. A community worthy of my time and commitment. A community where my efforts have meaning, purpose, and are appreciated. Today, I'm thankful for this community of awakening, a place to gain the knowledge and skills to improve my life, a family, a home, and a sanctuary for all of us seeking refuge from the storm. And let's remember, as conscientious practitioners, we must recognize our responsibility to the world, to strive to live skillfully while helping others do the same, to strive to live in balance and harmony with nature and others, to strive to gain mastery over our minds and embody our true benevolent nature, to expand our hearts and minds, transcending our shared human limitations, to not intentionally harm sentient life or our planet, to maturely accept and embrace reality of our situation while striving to improve it. Welcome everybody to our SBT Sutra Studies class. We are currently examining the Dhammapada, which is one of the most famous texts of all the collections of sutras. Today we'll be covering chapter 4 entitled Flowers, and I hope everybody did their homework and got their reading in. I wanted to share something else. As I've been working with our studies, this is a new program for us, so we just started it. We're still trying to figure out exactly how we're going to share this. Throughout the studies so far, of the three different versions, we had Gil Fronsdale's text as our primary text. But the thing about it is that Gaden Schippel's text is the only one that lists the verses as they were given to a specific place and specific topic. Meaning, his is the only text that organizes them as to which texts were shared at one time. This is continuing to be a very, very important aspect of our studies. And so therefore, I'm switching it. I'm going to make Gaden Schippel's text our primary text. Now, it doesn't change anything. Everyone still has all the different texts, but it's the best text to start with because we know which verses to read in which order. If you remember in our orientation, we talked about the one thing about the Dhammapada to remember is that all of these verses are pulled from a vast array of sutras. Oftentimes, though they're grouped in chapters and they're listed one after the other, oftentimes they have nothing to do with the previous verse or the one that comes later. They're simply organized by what appear to be similar topics. So it gets confusing when we read a verse and then we'll go back to the prior verse to get some clarity. But we have to keep in mind that prior verse has nothing to do with the verse we're reading. It could have come from a completely different set of sutras. So by understanding which ones were said at which place at the same time, we can then understand which ones work with each other. So with that said, I'm going to make that the priority from now of them. And on a personal note, I'm very fond of Gaden Schippel's version. I find that Gil Fronsdale's presentation and Buddhaghosa's presentation are brilliant, but they're more translations. And I'm much more a fan of interpretations. And Gaden Schippel's is more of an interpretation. It's not necessarily trying to translate every word by word. It's more focused on giving readers the proper understanding of the verse. To me, that's always a much more important aspect. So with that said, let's get started. What do you think? Let me remember how I do this. This is getting complicated with all the things I have. Okay, so we're on chapter 4, Flowers. I thought the title of this was quite strange, isn't it? Because flowers are a big part of Buddhism. It's a symbol of enlightenment and awakening. But in this case, flowers has a much different meaning, and we're gonna be getting to that. Chantel, would you like to read? Now, this is a great example of why I'm making Gaiden Sherpel's the primary focus. If you see here, these verses were spoken at however you want to pronounce that. I'm sorry, I don't read Pali very well. But as you can see here, there's 3 verses that are oriented to that place and that time. So we want to read those 3. And then the next are spoken at another place. I find it's very important to keep that in mind. And Gaiden Sherpel's is the only text that allows that. So Chantel, if it's okay, please read the first 3 verses.
Sure, Tarpa. Does anyone wish to overcome Yama's realm of destruction, this world and the realm of the gods? Who will search for the glorious words of the virtuous Dharma as though they were searching for flowers? Should I do the second one as well, Tarpa?
Yeah, please, just read through the 3.
Right. The disciples wish to conquer this world and the realm of the gods, Yama's realm of destruction. The disciples seek out the glorious words of the virtuous Dharma as though searching for flowers. Whoever realizes that this body is just like foam, whoever knows all things are like a mirage, will break Mara's arrows of desire, which look like flowers, and will travel on unseen by the Lord of Death.
Oh, thank you. That's lovely. And let's move to this one. This is Gil Fransdale's. Nigel, would you like to read these first 3?
Definitely. Who will master this world and the realms of Yama and the gods? Who will select a well-taught Dharma teaching as a skilled person selects a flower? One in training will master this world and the realms of Yama and the gods. One in training will select a well-taught Dharma teaching as a skilled person selects a flower. Knowing this body is like foam, fully awake to its mirage-like nature, cutting off Mara's flowers, one goes unseen by the King of Death.
Oh, thank you. And Yoli, do you want to read one? Read these 3? I think Yoli's with us, is she?
Yeah, I am.
It's muted.
Mute. Who shall overcome this earth, this realm of Yama, and the sphere of men and gods? Who shall bring to perfection the well-thought path of wisdom, as an expert garland-like maker would his floral design? A striver on the path shall overcome this earth, this realm of Yama, and the sphere of men and gods. The striver on the path shall bring to perfection the well-thought path of wisdom, as an expert garland maker would his floral design. Realizing that this body is like froth, penetrating its mirage-like nature, and plucking out Mara's flower-tipped arrows of sensuality, go beyond the sight of the King of Death.
quite ominous. Oh, thank you, guys. So far we've been really digging into Gaiden Sherpel's presentation and Gil Fransdale's, but I'm afraid this chapter, Buddha Rakita, really takes the cake on this one. I thought this last one that Yoli just read has the most clarity out of all of them. And let's just go a little slower through it again. So 44, who shall, now what's important is to pay strong attention to the question marks. So the first verse is asking this question, the second verse is answering it. Who among all men or women shall overcome this earth, this realm of Yama, and this fear of men and gods? Who shall bring the perfection, who shall bring to perfection the well-taught path of wisdom as an expert garland maker would his floral design? A striver of the path shall overcome this earth, this realm of Yama, and this sphere of men and gods. The striver of the path shall bring to perfection the well-taught path of wisdom, as an expert garland maker would his floral design. So I thought that was awesome. I think Buddha Rakita does a great job of really capturing the spirit here. And so overcoming this earth, this realm of Yama. So clearly they're talking about samsara. And remember that Yama in Tibetan Buddhism is the Lord of Death. In the Pali scriptures, I think he kind of controls the negative realms of existence, the hell realms, the animal realms, ghost realms. For some of you, we don't teach this because we're a secular group, but Buddhism often talks about 6 realms of existence in samsara. And they start at the bottom with the hell realm, then the hungry ghost, then the animal realm, the human realm, the fighting god or asura realm, and the God realm. So these are the 6 realms within samsara. So even if you're a god, or maybe the better term here is deity, all of these, even if you're at the top, are still all within samsara, and only a Buddha can achieve a liberation from all of these realms. And so, but in Tibetan Buddhism, Yama is, if you've ever seen the Wheel of Life, it's a very popular painting in Thangka in Tibetan Buddhism. It's a big wheel, and in the center are the 3 poisons, and they list all the different realms of existence and all the causes for those. Well, on the outside, there's a big demon that's holding the whole wheel together, and that's Yama, that's the Lord of Death himself. And if you remember from our last talks, both Yama and Mara come from the same source. And on a secular level, those both should be seen as our samsaric tendencies, our afflictions, our limitations, our ignorance, our greed, all of those things that create the suffering in our lives. That is exemplified by Yama or Mara. I think in a secular way, they're synonymous. When you look at the deities in traditional, they do have different roles. But Yama is often considered the Lord of Death, where Mara is the Lord of Illusion. But in a secular way, they pretty much mean the same thing. So, well, with that said, the first part of this, they're clearly talking about samsara and the sphere of men and gods, all beings that are in samsara. And who shall bring to perfection the well-taught path of wisdom, as an expert garland maker would his floral design? So here they're talking about who would have this amazing skill, right? This skillfulness to walk this path and to make this path come alive. And in the next verse, we have the answer. A striver on the path. So that's a practitioner. Literally, they mean anyone within the 4 types of practitioner, which in the Pali tradition is the path entering and the once I don't remember the names of them all. I'm sorry, folks. Oh, once returner and non-returner. We don't study those in Tibetan Buddhism. Tibetan Buddhism replaces them with the ideal of the Bodhisattva. Simply here they're asking the question, who would gain liberation? And the answer is, here is the practitioner. One second, let me check my notes. Very good. So on 46, realizing that this body is like froth, penetrating its mirage-like nature, and plucked out Mara's flower-tipped arrows of sensuality, go beyond sight of the king of death. So this is just packed with meaning. Let's take a brief look at the others. And this is going to be 46 here. Whoever realizes that this body is just like foam, whoever knows all things are like a mirage, will break Mara's arrows of desires, which look like flowers, and will travel on unseen by the Lord of Death. Let me see this translation. And Gil Fransdale's on 46. Knowing this body is like foam, fully awake to its mirage-like nature, cuts off Mara's flowers. One goes unseen by the king of death. Okay, how do I want to unpack this? So in Buddhism, we have the idea of impermanence, one of the main teachings in Buddhism. And the Buddha had a lot to say about impermanence. He said that our existence and our experience of existence is fleeting. And he listed a big long list of adjectives and analogies. And he talked about our existence and experience is like a bubble. It's like lightning in the sky. It's like foam on water, or here froth, and that it's that our lives are in the course of time. Our lives are nothing but a lightning flash. Our experiences are nothing but lightning flashes or bubbles that are bursting, and that. When we realize that this and the mirage-like nature of our existence, that yes, we exist, but we exist much differently than we think we do. We exist in a less substantial way than we think we do. And they talk about plucking out Mara's flower-tipped arrow of sensuality. So here's when we start to get into this strange take on the strange usage of the word flower. So here they're talking about flowers as desire or sensuality. And they're talking about almost, Mara's or our own afflictions, our ignorance and our confusion, makes these desires and sensuality and sense desires look like these beautiful things that we want, like flowers, right? It paints a picture of them that's much greater than they seem. And this is another aspect of the mirage itself. So we have a poem with SBT. We have an affirmation in SBT that I think really adds some relativity to this. And we have this, let me give it, okay, good. We have this affirmation called the affirmation of suffering. And this really paints a good picture of what they're trying to say here. So we have this word, first of all, reifying. And reifying is to make something more substantial, to make something more real. You could also use the word exaggerating, right? So here, through reifying my identity, through exaggerating the validity of my identity, through exaggerating how real my identity is. That's what the word reifying means here. Okay, so let's read from there. Through reifying my identity, I reify my vulnerability. Through reifying my vulnerability, I reify my problems. Through reifying my problems, I reify my suffering. Conversely, Through realizing the ethereal nature of my identity. Ethereal means mirage-like, like a cloud, like mist, not so real, ethereal. Through realizing the ethereal nature of my identity, I realize the ethereal nature of my vulnerability. Through realizing the ethereal nature of my vulnerability, I realize the ethereal nature of my problems. Through realizing the ethereal nature of my problems, I realize the ethereal nature of my suffering. So this is what they're talking about, that it's by seeing the word in an exaggerated, reifying way, this is where samsara begins. This is the true ignorance that Buddhism is dealing with. It's the ignorance on how things truly exist. The Dalai Lama often will talk about, he'll define samsara as simply the exaggeration of reality, in which everything seems more real. And in that sense, it means more important, more, everything has to, I'm losing all my vocabulary. What are these words I used to say? So everything is more important. It's more, everything has to be done right now, right in this moment, right? The importance of everything is exaggerated. So that itself is samsara. We exaggerate our busyness, our speediness, our sense of importance. And so when we talk about this, understand this mirage-like existence, that's what we're talking about. When you realize the ethereal nature of yourself, of reality, then your own vulnerability is lessened. Because if the more substantial you view yourself, well, clearly the more substantial the danger is to you in every moment. Whether that danger is physical, emotional, it's strengthened. And so by realizing that, we free ourselves and we're freed from Mara. I hope I did okay on that one. I don't think that was one of my better explanations, but nevertheless, I think I did okay. All right, let's move ahead, everybody. We're now going to we're going to do 47 and 48. Nigel, would you like to read these?
Okay. Death sweeps away the person obsessed with gathering flowers, as a great flood sweeps away a sleeping village. The person obsessed with gathering flowers, insatiable for sense pleasures, is under the sway of death.
Thank you, Nigel. We're reading Gaydon Chappell's first. Are you reading from the book?
I'm reading from Gil Fronsell.
Yeah, can you read from the screen?
I don't have it on my screen. I've got everybody's faces on the screen.
Oh, my mistake, everybody. I didn't put it up. Let me do that again. How's that, Nigel?
Okay, good.
My fault.
Okay. Just as a raging river sweeps away a sleeping village, death will carry off the ones spellbound by picking flowers. Those whose minds are held spellbound by picking flowers will be overwhelmed by death, the desires still unsatisfied.
Oh, that's lovely. And Yoli, you want to read the next one? What are we on, 47 and 48?
Do we do it with Gil's?
You could read this. You could
Okay.
Read the screen.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm adjusting them.
Death sweeps away the person's obsessed with death sweeps away the person obsessed with gathering flowers, as a great flood sweeps away a sleeping village. The person obsessed with gathering flowers, insatiable for sense pleasures, is under the sway of death.
Oh, thank you. And Chantal, would you like to read the next one?
Sure, Tarpa. As a mighty flight sweeps away the sleeping village, so death carries away the person of distracted mind who only plucks the flowers of pleasure. The destroyer brings under his sway the person of distracted mind who, insatiate in sense desires, only plucks the flowers of pleasure.
Oh, that's lovely. You know, in my last explanation, I kept looking for the word immediacy. I'm so sorry, I kept blacking out on it. The idea of exaggerating, we exaggerate the importance, the immediacy of life, that everything has to be done right now at this moment. Everything is crucial. That exaggeration of life is samsara itself. And when we learn to calm down and relax and not to be so reactionary, that is the beginning of awakening. Sorry, folks, sometimes I just black out on them. Anyway, Chantal, that was lovely. And again, Buddha Rakita does a beautiful job on this chapter, doesn't he? This is so clear. As a mighty flood sweeps away the sleeping village, so death carries away the person of distracted mind who only plucks the flowers of pleasure. So again, we have a nice definition of how they're using the word pleasure, flowers, as sensual pleasure, right? I think it's very strange. We always use flowers as a symbol of awakening in Buddhism. In fact, when it's said that originally the Buddha wouldn't let people create statues and paintings of him, and he only gave permission that you could use the tree as a symbol of Buddhism, which sheltered him during his practice. And you could use the lotus flower, which symbolized awakening. So I found it very strange they decided to use flower here for the opposite. You're using flower here as all the samsaric pleasures in life. Nevertheless, that's how it's written. So, and as a mighty flood sweeps away the sleeping village, so death. And remember, in our last class, we talked about death being samsara as well, death being trapped in the samsaric realms, and the deathless is awakening. So death here means the unawakened, and so and for me, I've often feel desire as like a flood, right? I think we've all felt that way at times, whatever the desire it is. When you have a great desire, it seems like our minds are just flooded by that quality. And then we have the destroyer again. That's samsara. That's Mara and Yama, and that's samsara, bringing under his sway the person of distracted mind who insatiate in sense desires, only plucking the flowers of pleasure. So those who are only interested in samsaric pleasures and sense desires are continuously swept away by the flood of desire. Oh, that paints a serious picture. Nigel, would you like to read the next one?
Sure. Just as a bee extracts the flower's nectar without disturbing the flower's color or scent, the sage moves through the town and quickly passes on. Do not reflect upon the missteps of others, their deeds and misdeeds, but rather look upon what you yourself have done and left undone.
Thank you. And Miss Yoli?
As the bee gathers nectar and moves on without harming the flower, its color, or its fragrance, just so should a sage walk through a village. Do not consider the faults of others or what they may have or haven't done. Consider rather what you yourself have or haven't done.
Oh, that's lovely. And Chantal, do you want to read this one? I think we're here.
As a bee gathers honey from the flower without injuring its color or fragrance, even so the sage goes on his arms round in the village. Let none find fault with others. Let none see the omissions and commissions of others, but let one see one's own acts done and undone.
Oh, thank you. Very nice. And again, Buddhaghosa's version, I think, is so clear. We talk about here the sage. So a sage is a gifted practitioner, right? The Buddha is often referred to as a sage. So they talk about high practitioners being sages, but I think just good practitioners are sages. And so, but what really brings it home for me is when they talk about the sage going on his alms round in the villages. So probably most of you know that in South Asia and in the Buddhist time, the monks with their alms bowls or begging bowls would go on their begging rounds, their alms rounds. And they go through the village and they go to homes and people would put a little food in. And so, but the idea here is that as practitioners, that we need to be able to exist in a world, but to not be so indoctrinated into it all. And I think they're talking here much about the social conditioning of things, right? So to live in, the Christians have a great term, to be in the world but not of it, to live in the world but not be of it. And so this is true of monastics. They're supposed to, we live in this world and we interact with the world, but monastics are careful not to get caught up in the sensual pleasures of the world, the samsaric pleasures of the world. And so here they're giving a little warning that again, the samsaric world can be like a flood, and those desires can just overwhelm us. So we want to be very exacting and very gentle and discerning how we interact with the world. Should I be leaving space for people to ask questions? Or can everybody just speak up if a question comes? Mm-hmm. I feel like I'm really juggling. I'm doing all these screens, but at the same time, I don't see everybody on my screen. Maybe Nigel.
I've been scanning screens to see if anybody has a raised hand or anything. So I keep scanning for that.
Good. So let's do it like that. And also you can, anyone can post a question on the chat or a comment, and Nigel will watch that as well. Mm-hmm. Hey, that's perfect. And we're on to 51 and 52. Nigel, would you like to read these?
Like a beautiful flower full of color, but without fragrance. Even so, fruitless are the fair words of one who does not practice them. Like a beautiful flower full of color and also fragrance. Even so, fruitful are the fair words of one who practices them.
Thank you, Nigel. And I should have started with this one. I'll read this one. This is Gaiden Shepos. Like beautiful flowers that have no fragrance, fine words which are not acted upon are fruitless. Like beautiful flowers with both color and scent, fine words which are acted upon will bear fruit. Yoli, would you like to read this one?
Like a beautiful flower, brightly colored but lacking scent, so are well-spoken words, fruitless when not carried out. Like a beautiful flower, brightly colored and with scent, so are well-spoken words, fruitful when carried out.
Oh, that's lovely. And Nigel read this first one. So this is pretty much the same in all of them. So, and of course, we're all familiar with this. This is often a topic in modern Buddhism, is that so many people, and I don't think Buddhism alone, I think religion in general, right? That people will study, they'll say all their prayers, but are they actually putting it into words? Are they really practicing it? And so, here they're just talking about that we really have to, if we expect something from our practice, we have to put these words into practice themselves. And how about reading this one, Yoli? Just a single.
Just as one makes many garlands from a heap of flowers, those who are certain of death perform many virtuous acts.
Lovely. Chantal?
Just as from a heap of flowers many garlands can be made, so you with your mortal life should do many skillful things. The scent of flowers, sandalwood, jasmine, and rosebay doesn't go against the wind.
Thank you. And I guess I'll read one. As from a great heap of flowers many garlands can be made, even so should many good deeds be done by one born immortal. Again, I think Buddhaghosa's translation presentation is wonderful. And so there are, I think, two things that come out of this. One of them is that we want to do many deeds, right? Because we're talking about from a heap of flowers creating many garlands. So in the same way, we should make many good deeds by one born immortal. So a born immortal would be born in samsara. And I think that's pretty straightforward. Nigel, would you like to read this one?
The sweet scents of sandalwoods, of tagara and jasmine travel only with the wind, but the fragrance of holiness travels even against the winds. The influence of the holy ones extends everywhere.
Oh, it's quite beautiful, isn't it? And I was reading that tagara is a fragrant, a powder that's very fragrant. Yoli, would you like to read the next one?
The scent of flowers, sandalwood, jasmine, and rosebay doesn't go against the wind, but the scent of a virtuous person does travel against the wind. It spreads in all directions.
Isn't that pretty? And Yoli, you want to try this one? Oh, I'm sorry, right here. Is that right? Yeah, 54.
Not the sweet smell of flowers, not even the fragrance of sandal, tagara, or jasmine blows against the wind, but the fragrance of virtuous blows against the wind. Truly virtuous, man pervades all directions with the fragrance of his virtue.
Oh, they're so sexist. Look at that. The virtuous man. What about all those virtuous women? There's so many. And of course, this is just praise of the virtuous ones. And I think they're highlighting that the qualities that we attain as practitioners are the most wonderful and desirable of all qualities. They're far greater than all of the samsaric pleasures that we can experience. Nigel, you have two here to read.
Okay. Though the sandalwoods, the tagara, and the blue lotus, the flowers of summer, have a wonderful fragrance, the fragrance of moral practice is sweeter still. The fragrance of tagara and sandalwood is sweet but slight. The fragrance of moral practice rises even to the heavens.
That's wonderful. Chantal? Wait 1 second. We're on 55. Okay. 55 right here.
The scent of virtue is unsurpassed, even by sandalwood, rosebay, water lily, and jasmine. Slight is the scent of rosebay or sandalwood, but the scent of virtuous is supreme, drifting even to the gods.
Oh, that's lovely said, isn't it? That's quite beautiful. And Yoli, you want to read the last one?
Of all fragrances, sandal, tagara, blue lotus, and jasmine The fragrance of virtue is the sweetest. Faint is the fragrance of tagara and sandal, but excellent is the fragrance of the virtuous, rafting even amongst the gods.
I like the imagery that you can actually, the virtuous people, they smell better. And it's kind of funny, but they often say that about like the Buddha, and they say great practitioners, that they have an almost a scent of flowers about them. I don't know if it's true. It's just an old Tibetan story. But I like that idea of our own virtue, like just pervading all directions around us, huh? That's quite beautiful. And Nigel, you want to read this one?
Mara does not know the path of those who are free, those with genuine wisdom, who abide in vigilance and perfect conduct.
Oh, thank you. And Shenta? 57. Would you like me to read this? Mara does not find the path of those endowed with virtue, living with diligence, and freed from right understanding. Yoli, would you like to read 57?
Mara never finds the path of the truly virtuous, who abide in heedfulness and are freed by perfect knowledge.
And clearly, this is saying that, of course, it's using Mara to symbolize, samsara and our afflictions and our limitations, finding us. But the fact is that it's quite the opposite, isn't it? That by developing goodness, I think they're talking about virtue here, but truly what they're talking about is just goodness, like we teach in SBT, basic goodness. If you abide in basic goodness, these other qualities, you transcend. Nigel, how about reading the next two?
Okay, it's 58 and 59. A fresh and fragrant lotus of breathtaking beauty grows on a heap of rubbish along the highway. In the same way, the followers of the perfect Buddha, those who shine with wisdom, stand out from the dust heap of ordinary men, those who are blind to virtue.
And Chantal, are you with us? You want to read the next one?
Sure, Tarpa. Mara does not find the path of those endowed with virtue.
Oh, can you read 58 and 59 here? Sorry.
Okay. As a sweet-smelling lotus, pleasing to the heart, may grow in a heap of rubbish discarded along the highway, so a disciple of the fully awakened one shines with wisdom amid the rubbish heap of blind common people.
Thank you. And Yoli, the last two.
Upon a heap of rubbish in the roadside ditch blooms a lotus, fragrant and pleasing. Even so, on the rubbish heap of blinded mortals, the disciple of the supremely enlightened one shines resplendent with wisdom.
Buddhaghosa has a nice vocabulary, doesn't he? You can see his teachings on YouTube. Just wonderful. I spent a lot of time in his monastery in India. I have many friends there off and on. He was passed away by the time I started going there, but his legacy lives on, and he was just an amazing teacher, a brilliant man. So one of the things that I find interesting is this last one seems a little out of place, pertaining to the topics we've talked about so far, and it just further demonstrates how a lot of these verses come from different parts of the sutra, and they're only put into these chapters because there is some similar material, meaning they're all about flowers, but the meaning of them all is quite different, right? And so this last two verses are much more traditional in Buddhism, talking about the lotus and talking about flowers as awakening. So that strikes me. The other thing about this is that many of you might know where this last verse comes from. It's quite famous. They say that when the Buddha achieved enlightenment, he had a vision of humanity, and he saw all of humanity as a lotus field. And now here they talk about the lotus field growing out of rubbish, but actually it's mud. It's like mud and muck that the lotus grows out of. It likes water, it likes mud. And so that's what a lotus field is. And so the Buddha saw all of humanity as a lotus field with all of the different people at different stages of development. He saw some people as just emerging from the mud and mire. And of course, here that mud represents our ignorance, our confusion, our samsaric desires, right? Our afflictions, our limitations, that's the mud. And he saw some people just rising up out of the mud, others starting to bloom higher up, and some in full bloom, way above the mud and mire. So that's always been a very powerful story and image in Buddhism. So this is where the story takes hold, and so the story kind of points at the idea that you have to have the mud to have the lotus, right? Out of that ignorance, out of that sensual desire, that fuels the lotus. The Tibetans will have a saying about that your path is like a field, and you have to have manure to have a good field, right? To grow good vegetables. And they say no shit, no flowers, right? No vegetables. That you need that manure to make to fertilize the fruits and vegetables. And so it's saying here that as much as we would probably like to skip all the difficult situations in our lives, there is a purpose to it all, and we learn from it all. So that's the idea of the last two. Oh, that's wonderful. Okay, I'm going to shut this off for a second and see everybody. Yes, Nigel. Highway. Oh, David said they didn't have cars back then. What did they meant by highway? Well, remember their translations. So maybe a highway is, where their carts are on and their horses and they're walking on. Roadway. But they're modern translations of ancient terms. Hello, Lynn. Thanks for joining us. Yeah. What did you think of this chapter? I thought it was pretty cool, huh? Did you find it insightful? Thumbs up. Oh, hey, there we go. There's those thumbs up. Yeah, good. I thought it was very insightful. It reminded me of so much that I learned as a monk. It just really touched so many important parts in Buddhism. Does anyone have any questions? Oh, David.
I found it really rich and warm, like wholehearted. I really enjoyed it. In all the translations.
I agree. It had a really positive tone, didn't it? The whole thing. And I really, in SBT, I think more than anything, we push goodness, right? Virtue, living a good life, supreme goodness, right? And when they talk about your virtue, your goodness as being like a scent that just carries with you, carry everywhere you go, that permeates in all directions, even against the wind. And in my own life, I can kind of relate to that as I strive to be a great monk. I do find that my efforts really seem to have that effect, that even even when I don't have much contact in certain areas, it seems like that virtue kind of leads the way, right? That it really does change the quality of your life itself. And I truly believe that the best way to improve your life is through virtue, is just to dig into goodness, right? And that like the six perfections and supreme generosity and supreme goodness and supreme love, supreme patience, all those wonderful qualities. Thank you, David. Chantal.
Yeah, I've got a question. They make mention of beyond men and deities or something to that effect, or the men and gods rather. And I want to know: is there something specific beyond that, or is it a great many things like no illusion, no desires, or is it there one specific sort of really, great thing that we should aspire to that's beyond men and gods?
To me, it was specific. When they talk about the realm of men and gods, we're talking about the six realms, the six desire realms, which we mentioned before, from hell realms, hungry ghosts, animals, humans, asura, fighting gods, and god realms. They're all in samsara. So the gods have the best life of all of them. You know, they have these great lives, but they still have a very subtle suffering, and they still at some point will fall from being a god and they'll have to enter in one of the other realms. So all of these beings are trapped within samsara. The only being that leaves samsara is a Buddha. So that's very specific. They're talking about becoming a Buddha or a bodhisattva, a great practitioner, yeah. Lovely. I have some ending comments that I wanted to share. I just want to make sure everybody got their 2 cents in. Good. I think the style of the teaching is going pretty good, huh? I'm starting to get the hang of it a little bit more. Good. I think it's going to be a very rewarding sutra studies, yeah? Good. And every week we do it, it gets a little better. Okay. If there are no more comments, I'd like to share my my ending conclusion. So what I wanted to do was just in another kind of form of another form, just to recap what we talked about. So in this chapter, they're differentiating the path of sensory pleasure versus the path of wisdom, virtue, and understanding. So they make a big distinction between these two, right at the beginning. They want to make sure clearly that everybody knows the pros and cons of each and that they're very different. And the fact that the only ones that can escape samsara and awaken are the strivers on the path. So that is the practitioner, but I'm assuming they're talking about high-level practitioners. The others are working their way up. They also shared that realizing our true impermanent and confused nature is the path to liberation. And it reminds me of that old quote that, wisdom begins with the thought that you don't know anything. And it's the same here. When you truly understand impermanence and you realize our confused nature, the ignorance that we suffer from, when we truly understand our afflictions and our limitations, that is the first step into the authentic path to liberation, right? I don't think the path really begins until you have a glimpse into that. Also, they mentioned that sense desires are as uncontrollable as a powerful flood, and those who are merely focused on earthly pleasures are swept away by the flood in every moment. And that's the flood of our intentions, our desires, our impulses. Then they talked about as a bee delicately takes pollen and never disturbs the flower, or a monk who silently moves through a town, so too should we interact with the samsaric world in that same way. You know, we need our food, we need our things, we have to interact, but we do it carefully and we do it really skillfully. We understand the danger. And again, that quote, to be in the world but not of the world, that's something that monks really aspire to. I think I've heard many teachers that believe the Buddha wrote it, but I think it's an old Christian analogy from way back. And they talked about, don't waste your time in judgment of others. Focus on your own intentions and actions. Be sure to put your studies and values actually into practice, right? And so today's a great example. We're studying these various verses. Now, how many of us are really going to put them into practice this week? You know? Can you lift them off the page and actually incorporate them in your life? Can you put them to work, right? They talked about, because the merit of a sincere practitioner is the greatest of enjoyments. Well, they talk about, the merit of a sincere practitioner is the greatest of enjoyments. They talk about, better than all things and all smells is the virtue, right? And again, back to this lotus and mud reference. It's from the experience and wisdom gained from our failures, our non-virtues, our mistakes, along with our afflictions, our greed, our ignorance. It's through those that we learn to transcend them, to transcend our confusion, our afflictions, and our limitations, right? So we can't beat ourselves up for the mistakes we've made in the past. As the Buddha said, all lotuses emerge from the mud, right? So no matter what you feel guilty about in your past, all beings arise from that mud. It's there. And the idea is to use it to your advantage and learn from it so you can transcend it. And then lastly, the awakened ones shine with wisdom. I forgot which verse we had that from, but of course SBT loves the word shine because it's one of our practices. In our Skillful Living series, we teach a practice of shining, and so we always kind of key in on that word. And I liked it in the phrase, "The awakened ones shine with wisdom and are no longer swept away by the flood of samsara, forever lifted above the tide." I thought that was super powerful, right? And it's the wisdom that does it, right? And what we mean by wisdom, we mean understanding. When you understand yourself, who and what you are, your relationship towards others, your relationship to your environment, your relationship to reality, then that's what saves us from the flood. That's what allows us to transcend and lift ourselves up above it. Any questions or comments before we end today's lovely teaching? Did you enjoy yourselves? Was some of it insightful? I'm still getting the hang of these things, right? Yeah, good. Yeah, I didn't think I was a very good speaker tonight, but some days you got it, some days you don't. I got to stop drinking before the classes. That's a joke. I'm a monk. I'm not allowed to drink. Everybody knows that. I'm just being silly. So with that said, I want to remind everybody that the sutra teachings are meant as practice instructions. So in order to get the greatest benefit, we need to engage fully with them, utilizing the three great objectives of study, contemplation, and meditation. Your work this week is to discover how these teachings apply to your daily life, transforming them from words on the page into living Dharma. That's a big job, isn't it? And for an example, we're talking so much about virtue, and that virtue is the greatest of all scents and fragrances. And so, bring that into your life and see if it's true. Put some effort into your goodness. And what we mean by goodness, we don't mean, going out and starting a charity. We mean just your friendliness, your kindness, your care for others. You know, put some more effort into that, in your benevolent qualities of caring and loving family and friends, helping people at work, and see what kind of quality comes from it when you increase that. I've dedicated my life to it, you know, and to me, boy, it really pays off. Those verses truly ring true. Okay, friends, why don't we end today's class with our altruistic affirmation? May all be healthy, may all be prosperous, may all be well, may all be present, free of past regret and future worry. May all abide in constant appreciation, which is a source of great joy and contentment. May all realize their true nature and the true nature of reality, which is awakening. Thanks for joining me, friends. See you tomorrow. We got a big class tomorrow, 10-week meditation program. Week 7, we're going to be learning fast body scanning. See you there.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Deborah. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
You.